It is now in 12c possible to grant roles to program units, to stored program units. Remember, this didn't apply to anonymous PL/SQL. Anonymous PL/SQL always executed with the has always executed with the enabled roles of the invoker, but we can now grant a role to a stored procedure. There are a couple of conditions. The role granted must be directly granted to the owner. I'm not sure if this is documented or not, or it could have been issues I had with doing my own testing, but certainly when last time I tested this thoroughly, I found that if I granted roles to roles to roles to roles, once I got down a tree, it no longer functioned. So that could have been just me, or maybe documented. But certainly to be sure, the role granted must be granted directly to the person who's writing the code. Also, and this is documented, the owner still needs direct privileges on the objects that the code references. And that makes perfect sense because the role might be disabled at the time that he happens to be creating the object. So you need the role, you need direct privileges on the object referenced by the code. The invoker, however, needs absolutely nothing. The invoker now needs nothing, no roles, no privileges. All he needs is execute on the procedure. The invoker will then take on that role during the course of the call. This will tighten up the definer's rights problem in that our user doesn't need to have much at all. He only needs the bare minimum. And then only that role will be available, only the role is available to the invoker during the call, not anything else that the owner happens to have. You can combine this as well with invoker's rights. And either way, we are controlling privilege inheritance. Invokers' rights plus roles restrict the ability of definers to inherit privileges from invokers and invokers to inherit privileges from definers, both of which raise that ghastly possibility of privilege escalation associated typically with SQL injection. And grant create session, create procedure to dev, and then I'll give him select on Scott.emp. So I've given dev the minimum he needs to write code that hits that table. Then create a role. Create role R1, and I'll grant select on Scott.emp to R1. And finally, grant R1 to dev. Right. So that's met the requirements. The role is granted to the owner. The owner does have direct privileges. So connect as dev/dev and create my favorite procedure. So the same procedure that executes the definer's rights and queries Scott.emp. But now what we can do that's new is I can grant R1 to procedure listemp. Now, I'll create a very low privileged user now. I'll need to connect the sysdba and create user low, identified by low. And all I shall give him is create session, and execute on that procedure. Grant execute on grant execute on dev.listemp to low. So that's all Low's got. He can log on and he can run one procedure. Well, what actually is going to happen to him? Well, if he tries to log on, connect as low/low, set server output on, and see if he can run that thing. Well, if he, just for check, if he tries to select star from Scott.emp, he is the lowest of the low. He's my user low. But then execute dev.listemp, trying to retrieve the clerks, and it works. And because my user low has virtually no privileges at all, there's no possible danger of the malicious developer being able to inherit dangerous privileges from him. Now, the final step, that functioned because of the privilege that I mentioned earlier, the privilege we saw on the previous slide, which was inherit any privileges. If I revoke that, if I revoke, and this is what you should be doing in all your systems after upgrade, revoke inherit privileges on user low from public, connect there, and it fails. So the final bit of tightening up the security is to grant the privilege specifically. We grant inherit privileges on user low to dev. And now we have a totally secure system in that my low privilege user dev can do that and nothing more. My low privilege developer dev can't grab anything he needs to as well. And that tightens things up totally.